Yeah. Now you talk about plasticity, and I'd like to kind of delve into that a little bit. And because we do set limits on, this is as much as somebody can learn, and then we've hit a plateau, but that's not something you believe in. And I kind of want you to explain that so that parents know that there is not a stopping point for their child. Because I think sometimes we do, we say, okay, that's all about all we are going to get in them, and that they're going to be good to go.
Right. Well, in my training as a teacher, I wasn't trained in special ed originally. I was just trained as a kindergarten teacher. But in that kind of training, earlier on, they would not have taken a child with a 40 IQ, that they said was a 40 IQ, and tried to teach them to read at all.
Right.
They would just put them in life skills. And my daughter, they said, had a 40 IQ, and that's a whole nother topic of thinking differently. but I don't have time to go into right now. But we worked on those foundational things. And she was able to read as a hobby. She loved reading. And she didn't have the greatest comprehension, but she was able to read. So, and let me just give you another example. She was very, and I'm referring to her in the past tense because she has since gone on to be with the Lord, which was a very sad thing for us, but, she just taught me so much. She was she didn't have a good sense of where she was in space. We'd be walking down the walkway or sidewalk, and she would just push me over, and I'd be over on the grass because she didn't know where she was in space. And so by doing some activities, like one of them was deep pressure, where I just pressed on her hands, I pressed on her arms, just with deep, and pressed on her legs. And every time I pressed, I found out later what I was doing is sending a message from her finger to her brain to develop that pathway. And every time I pressed, it caused dendrites, which is what grows in your brain, to form that makes those pathways. So she would always spill milk, and you're having these. You keep saying, well, you're not being careful enough. Well, if they don't know where they are in space, they just knock over things and they push you out of the way, and they're too rough with their siblings and things like that. But by stimulating with using that frequency, intensity, and duration with specific activities, it builds new pathways that really do form and cause better function. Is that making sense?
Definitely. I think probably some of that is related to those pressure vests or the weighted blankets that a lot of parents use too, and that seem to help kids calm down and stay focused. And
yes, it gives them, it's basically giving them enough information to know where they are. And so if you don't know where you are, you just kind of wander around until you bump into something, and then you get enough information that you go, oh, this is where I am.
Probably the information you wanted, but yes. Exactly. Oh, well, that's neat. God is so good. He's made us in such a wonderful way, and we're just starting to figure out, little pieces of that. And it's just awesome that, you have this experience that you're sharing, and we have just the ability to hear from other people that have learned as they've homeschooled their kids, or they've gotten training, and just as we've grown as individuals in teaching other people and helping them succeed, and just the lessons we learn about not only them but us in the process, and that's exciting.
Yeah. Well, the plasticity can go through every area, really. Working on your auditory processing is part of building that plasticity in that area. So the storage of information, moving things to where they need to be stored, correctly. That has to do with changing the plasticity of the brain. And our brain is changing all the time. We used to, the scientists and everything, they used to think that we were hardwired about 20 years old, and it was kind of downhill from there. But
oh no.
oh my goodness. But they found out, and if you think about it, you know that this is true, because if somebody's had a stroke and they've had damage to their brain, but they regain function, you know that plasticity is working, because otherwise they would just be in that state and it wouldn't change.
Right.
So God's given us that plasticity for all of our lives, as long as we stimulate our brain.
And that's a good point. We got to keep doing that.
Yes, yes.